Hey baseball fans, I'm Matt Gross, aka the Rhode Island Rocky fan, and in today's installment of Purple Row Video, we're going to talk about the extremely important 10-game stretch the Rockies have coming up. I'm sure you've already looked at the schedule, but if you haven't, they've got a 7-game homestand this weekend, 4 against the Giants, 3 against the Diamondbacks before they go on the road to their personal house of horrors in San Francisco for the Friday, Saturday, Sunday portion of Memorial Day weekend. And basically, you've got 10 games against the 2 teams in the division who are ahead of you, just barely ahead of you, 1.5 and 2 games ahead of you. So, this is about as important as it gets for the middle of May. I mean, you can't really have season make or break games in the middle of May, but you can have games where you really learn a lot about a team. You say, okay, what is this team really made of? And that's sort of what you're going to get in these next 10 games. You find out, can they beat the teams that they're probably going to have to beat if they're serious about playing meaningful baseball all the way to the end of the 162-game schedule. And that's what you really have here. And it's very, very important, not just because of that reason, but also because they have played pretty lousy baseball now for the majority of the month. After jumping out of the gate really hot, 13-4 start, 9 games over 500, they have gone out and they have lost 6 of the last 7 series. The only one they won was at Dodger Stadium, and that one's looking a little less impressive when you look at what the Dodgers were doing in the games surrounding that game. They missed Kershaw in that 3-game series, didn't have to face him, and they got shut down in the one game they faced a good pitcher in Ryu, and Greinke was on the DL. They killed the other starters, but they really were not able to do much against good pitching, and that's pretty much been the theme for the Rockies over the last couple of weeks, particularly over the last 8 games. I'm going to get that, and I really want to go into that specifically. Last week, I talked about in the video segment about drag factor and about how the Rockies, on paper, statistically, have about as good of an offense as you can really ask for, in that they have a chance to really, really limit the drag factor. That's on paper. Unfortunately, in just 1 week, the eye test is already telling me something different. And this is kind of where you want to compare the eye test and and what things say on paper, because I don't think they agree here. Statistics are saying, and I think they're right, that top to bottom, this Rockies lineup is excellent. The problem is, what the eye test is telling me is that they're arriving at these numbers by completely bombarding bad pitchers and going out like lambs against good ones. The Rockies have faced a stretch of good pitchers, which, is going to happen throughout the course of the season. But what's extremely discouraging is how they do not put up a fight against these pitchers. At least they have not up to this point. Do you realize in the last 8 games, in 6 of those 8 games, they have had stretches where they have gone 11 plate appearances or more without recording a hit? I mean, that is outrageously bad to think that you can go, look at this lineup, at how deep it is, and go that far into a game. 6 out of 8 times this week, 11 or more plate appearances consecutively without recording a hit. That cannot happen. I don't care who you're facing. It's one thing that you give him a little bit of pass in the Shelby Miller game where he almost threw a perfect game. You weren't going to hit him that night. That's baseball. That happened. Even Adam Wainwright, great pitcher, the Rockies have struggled against him in the past. You might give them a little bit of a pass on that one. That cannot happen 6 times in 8 games. And what's really frustrating is when they're not facing a good pitcher, they bombard them. 8 runs against Garcia and the Cardinals on Sunday. 9 runs against Villanueva and the rest of the Cubs bullpen on Tuesday. So when they're not facing good pitching, they can score a bunch of runs. That we know. What I really want to see out of this offense is when they're facing a good pitcher, they scratch out a run here, they scratch out a run there, and they put pressure on the other team and then get to the bullpen of the opponent and win games that way. Because notice once the Cubs bullpen came in last night after DeMarco left, they actually started, the offense looked better. Unfortunately, the game was pretty much over at that point, so it didn't matter. But you see where they can do better if they get the opposing starter out of the game. They have not done a good job running up pitch counts, and they have not done a good job getting people on base at all against some of these good starters. You think about 11 straight plate appearances without a hit, which they've done against 6 in their last 8 games. That stat just drives me nuts. That's almost half the outs you have to record in a game if you're the opponent. You gotta get 27 of them, 13 and a half would be happening, so 11 or more. Many of the cases it is 14 or more, but it's minimum 11 in 6 of the last 8 games. So that right there is just, it makes it a very, very important stretch for the Rockies. Say, can the offense, A, prove that they can beat one of these good teams in San Fran or Arizona, and 2, can the offense score its runs in a fashion that's a little more constructive than what we've seen so far. Now, specifically relating to the Giants, oh my goodness, this team really, really needs to start playing better baseball against San Fran. They have now lost 9 straight games going back to last year against San Francisco, which I guess part of it's understandable because they had, 2012 Rockies versus the division-winning Giants, so that's partly acceptable. But what is not going to be acceptable is if they go out and lay an egg this weekend. Because if you go back in the past, 2008, the Rockies won 11 out of 18 against the Giants. 2009, they went 8-10 against them. 2010, they split the games 9-9. When the Rockies have had decent teams, they've been able to pretty much split the series against San Francisco. They get knocked around by the Giants by the Bay. They beat the Giants in Coors Field. That's when they have good teams. When the Rockies don't play well, they get knocked around everywhere between the last 2 years. I think they went 5-13, then 4-14 in the 18 games last year. That cannot happen again this year if the Rockies want to be competitive. So what it comes down to is, can the Rockies play a good series against the Giants in Coors Field? That's what's fascinating from a Rockies perspective. But at the same time, this series is also fascinating from a Giants perspective, really, particularly tonight's game more than anything else. Because one thing that's funny is, and it would surprise a lot of people, you think of the Giants and when they've won the World Series as this great team with great starting pitching. But actually, they're starting to transform who they are. And they're becoming more like the Rockies. If you just compare the Giants and the Rockies, runs scored and runs allowed this year. No park factors, just straight up runs scored, runs allowed. The Rockies have scored 190 runs. The Giants have scored 183 runs. On the flip side, the Rockies have allowed 170 runs. The Giants have allowed 176 runs. Now that's not park adjusted. In fact, if you park adjust it, what that would tell you is that through 40 games, a quarter of the season now, this is not a tiny sample size, it's still not big enough to draw a conclusion off of, but it's a decent enough to say, that's interesting. If you park adjust it, it says that the Giants' offense has actually been better than the Rockies, and the Rockies' pitching has been better than the Giants. I don't think it's necessarily going to continue, but it's a fascinating development. And I think part of the reason for this is the Giants' rotation is starting to crack on the pitching side. And on the hitting side, you really have, they've really become a very, very solid offensive team, largely because of Buster Posey, one, becoming an emerging star, and two, you have Brandon Crawford is now an above average offensive option, at least he has been so far this year, at shortstop. So right there you take the two positions where you usually get the least amount of offense from, and they're getting above average production from both of those positions, one slightly above average in Crawford, and one way above average in Posey. So it's much easier to construct the rest of your offense. Now, on the rotation side though, they're flipping at the team because this rotation is not as impressive as it has been in years past. You already saw Lincecum last year kind of fall apart, which could have been a big problem for them. And still is that. Notice they haven't given him a long-term contract. They've got Bumgarner signed up for a long time. They got Kane signed up for a long time. They would not go to a Lincecum, which tells you a lot about what they think he's going to be in the coming years. So they're kind of hanging on with him. He has had a couple of good starts against San Diego and Atlanta, but overall he hasn't been that good again this year, particularly on the road. So you'll see how he does in the Saturday game. And Vogelsong, who unfortunately the Rockies are not going to see this series, may be turning back into the guy he was before he magically became one of the best pitchers in the entire division, even in that rotation, in 2011. So he's been a big part of their success the last 2 years. He has been awful this year. His ERA is 8. And unfortunately the Rockies are not going to see him this year. They may see him in Memorial Day weekend in San Francisco if he's still in the rotation at that point. They would be scheduled to get him there. But essentially, and then you got Barry Zito, who has pitched well so far this year, and will probably pitch well in his 2 starts against the Rockies, but he got mauled on Tuesday night in Toronto, and you would not expect him to be great for the majority of the season. So what it really comes down to is, and this is why tonight's game is extremely important for the Rockies, for the Giants as well as the Rockies, we've already covered why it's important for the Rockies, is that the Giants need Matt Cain to be good now. The bottom of the rotation is cracking. I truly believe this. And what they really need is they need two guys on the top to throw gems almost every time out to balance that off. And they may have that if Cain returns to form, but Matt Cain has not been Matt Cain this year. He's got a 5.04 ERA, and there's been several starts where he's given up a lot of hard hit balls, including a lot of long balls, a lot of home runs. So, in his last two starts, against the Dodgers and against the Braves, Cain has been very good. I think 7 1/3 innings against the Dodgers, 8 innings against the Braves. Looks very good in those two games. Tonight, if he can pitch well against the Rockies, that would be 3 starts. 3 starts in a row where he looks solid, which would, if you don't like the Giants, a bad sign, because that means it looks like he's getting back on track to being the pitcher he was. He's been the last, 4 years where he's combined for a 2.93 ERA and, 200 plus innings or what. He'll still get the innings either way. But he's back in that sub 3 ERA pitcher again. However, if the Rockies can knock him around tonight, and we know the Rockies are a great litmus test because they knock around any pitcher who's not pitching well, and they go down like lambs if their pitcher is pitching well. So it's a great litmus test from that perspective. If Matt Cain gets knocked around tonight, it lends more to the idea that he may be inconsistent throughout the he'll be up and down. He'll still show flashes of greatness throughout the season, but he won't be good enough to the point, or at least it won't look like he'll be good enough to the point where you'll be able to rely on him every single start to go out and throw a gem. Bumgarner's the only one that's been doing that so far for the Giants. They still have gotten 2 good starts of the 5 guys every time in the rotation because Cain's had a couple good starts, Lincecum has had a couple good starts, Zito's had a few good starts, and they've kind of, orchestrated this where they get Bumgarner plus 1 has had a really good start. That will be difficult to do throughout the course of the season if Cain is inconsistent. Particularly when you look at their schedule coming up. Their schedule is about to get more difficult. The Giants have had more of a home-weighted schedule so far. They're going to be playing more games on the road over the next month. And their pitching has given up a lot of runs on the road. So they're going to run into problems there if they do not have Cain. So tonight, if you're the Rockies, you don't just want to win this game because it's huge for you because you want to win the game because of the Giants, because you struggled against them, because you have to prove you can beat a good team again. They have not won a series against a team with a winning record yet. The Rockies have not. But it's also huge because you really want to cause more problems in that rotation for the Giants. And I'm telling you right now, if Matt Cain is going to be inconsistent, where he's good some days, good and bad others, they have a problem in that rotation. It doesn't mean they can't win the division, even if they have that problem, because they are very strong in the bullpen and they are very strong offensively. But it completely changes what you think about the Giants as a team as far as how they're going to win, which is really fascinating. And part of the reason why you could have, particularly the Rockies don't pitch well, some Coors Field classics in this game, particularly Saturday's game, which is Tim Lincecum against Juan Nicasio. That on paper has a Coors Classic 12-11 type game written all over it. So the bullpen's better be ready. Of course, that game will probably end up being 2-1. Now that's the way baseball works. But my goodness, you look at that matchup on paper, you say, wow, that could be a long night. If Lincecum pitches the way at Coors Field he has the past couple times, and Nicasio pitches just the way he's been in general. So that's what we're looking at. A very, very big series for the Rockies. A very, very interesting series from the Giants. Not really make a break for them, but just some interesting things to keep an eye on. Hopefully the Rockies can make it interesting, which they have not done the last couple times they faced the Giants, because it's always fun when the Rockies and the Giants are playing competitive games. Alright, enjoy the series. Hopefully we'll enjoy it, and I'll be back next week with another video.